Theravada collection on monastic law, a translation of the Pali Vinaya Pitaka into English, translated by Bhikkhu Brahmali and read by Angus Cargill. The allowance for sugar, etc. When the Buddha had stayed at Savatthi for as long as he liked, he set out wandering towards Rajagaya. While they were travelling, Venerable Revata, the doubter, saw a sugar factory. As he approached, he noticed they were mixing the sugar with flour and ash. He thought, sugar mixed with food is unallowable, and so it's unallowable to eat sugar at the wrong time. And being afraid of wrongdoing, he and his followers did not take sugar. They told the Buddha, "Why are they adding flour and ash to the sugar?" "To harden it, sir." "If they add flour or ash to the sugar to harden it, it's still considered sugar. I allow you to eat as much sugar as you like." While still travelling, Revata noticed mung beans sprouting from feces. He thought, mung beans are unallowable. They sprout even after being digested. And being afraid of wrongdoing, he and his followers did not eat mung beans. They told the Buddha, "Although mung beans may sprout after being digested, I allow you to eat as much of it as you like." On one occasion, a certain monk who had a stomachache drank a salty purgative and was cured. "I allow salty purgatives when you're sick. If you're not sick, I allow you to drink it mixed with water." 5. Discussion of the prohibition against storing indoors, etc. Wandering on, the Buddha eventually arrived at Rajagaya, where he stayed in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Soon afterwards, the Buddha had a stomachache. Venerable Ananda thought, previously, when the Buddha had a stomachache, he was comfortable after drinking the threefold pungent congee. He then asked for sesame seeds, rice, and mung beans, stored them indoors, cooked them himself indoors, and brought them to the Buddha, saying, "Sir, please drink the threefold pungent congee." When Buddhas know what is going on, sometimes they ask and sometimes not. They know the right time to ask and when not to ask. Buddhas ask when it is beneficial, otherwise not, for Buddhas are incapable of doing what is unbeneficial. Buddhas question the monks for two reasons: to give a teaching or to lay down a training rule. So he said to Ananda, "Ananda, where does this congee come from?" Ananda told him. The Buddha rebuked him. "It's not suitable, Ananda. It's not proper. It's not worthy of a monastic. It's not allowable. It's not to be done. How could you be so indulgent? What's been stored indoors in a monastery is unallowable. What's been cooked indoors in a monastery is unallowable. What's been cooked by oneself is unallowable. This will affect people's confidence." After rebuking him, he gave a teaching and addressed the monks. "You shouldn't eat what's been stored indoors in a monastery, what's been cooked indoors in a monastery, or what you have cooked yourself. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored indoors in a monastery, cooked indoors in a monastery, and cooked by yourselves, you commit 3 offenses of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored indoors in a monastery, cooked indoors in a monastery, but cooked by others, you commit 2 offenses of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored indoors in a monastery, but cooked outside, yet cooked by yourselves, you commit 2 offenses of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored outside, but cooked indoors in a monastery, and cooked by yourselves, you commit 2 offenses of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored indoors in a monastery, but cooked outside and cooked by others, you commit 1 offense of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored outside but cooked indoors in a monastery, yet cooked by others, you commit one offence of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored outside and cooked outside but cooked by yourselves, you commit one offence of wrong conduct. If you eat what's been stored outside and cooked by others, there is no offence. When the monks heard that the Buddha had prohibited cooking, being afraid of wrongdoing, they did not reheat. I allow you to reheat what's already been cooked. At that time, Rajgaya was short of food. People brought salt, oil, rice, and fresh food to the monastery. The monks stored it outdoors, but it was eaten by vermin and stolen by thieves. I allow you to store food indoors. The monks stored it indoors, but it was cooked outside. They were surrounded by scrap-eaters, and the monks ate in fear. I allow cooking indoors. Because of the famine, the attendants took more for themselves and gave less to the monks. I allow you to cook. I allow you to store food indoors in a monastery, to cook indoors in a monastery, and to cook yourselves. 6. Receiving what has been picked up. On one occasion, a number of monks who had completed the rainy season residence in Kāśyapīya were travelling to Rajagaya to visit the Buddha. While on their way, they did not receive sufficient food, whether fine or coarse, yet there was much fruit, but no attendant to offer it. When the monks arrived at Rajagaya, they were exhausted. They went to the bamboo grove, approached the Buddha, bowed, and sat down. Since it is the custom for Buddhas to greet newly arrived monks, he said to them, "I hope you're keeping well, monks. I hope you're getting by. I hope you're not tired from travelling. And where have you come from?" "We're keeping well, sir. We're getting by." And they told him what had happened. Soon afterwards, the Buddha gave a teaching and addressed the monks. "If there is no attendant but you see fruit, I allow you to pick it up yourself. You should then carry it until you see an attendant, put it on the ground and have it received. You may then eat it. I allow you to receive what you have picked up." On one occasion, a certain Brahmin had obtained fresh sesame seed and fresh honey. He thought, "Why don't I give this to the Sangha of monks headed by the Buddha?" He then went to the Buddha, exchanged pleasantries with him, and said, "Please accept tomorrow's meal from me, together with the Sangha of monks." The Buddha consented by remaining silent. Knowing that the Buddha had consented, the Brahmin left. The following morning, that Brahmin had various kinds of fine foods prepared. He then had the Buddha informed that the meal was ready. The Buddha robed up, took his bowl and robe, and went to that Brahmin's house, where he sat down on the prepared seat. That Brahmin personally served various kinds of fine foods to the Sangha of monks, headed by the Buddha. When the Buddha had finished his meal, the Brahmin sat down to one side. The Buddha then instructed, inspired, and gladdened him with a teaching, after which he got up and left. Soon after the Buddha had left, that Brahmin thought, "I invited the Sangha of monks, headed by the Buddha, to give them the fresh sesame seed and honey, but I forgot. Why don't I take the sesame seed and honey to the monastery in basins and water pots?" And he did just that. He then went up to the Buddha and said, "When I invited you for a meal, I forgot to give you these fresh sesame seeds and this honey. Please accept it." "Well then, Brahmin, give it to the monks." At this time food was scarce, and the monks refused an invitation to eat more, even after taking just a little. After reflection, they even declined altogether. Yet now the whole Sangha was being invited, and so, being afraid of wrongdoing, they did not accept. Accept, monks, and eat. I allow one who has finished his meal and refused an invitation to eat more, to eat non-leftovers that have been brought out. 7. The allowance for what has been received, etc. On one occasion, a family who was supporting Venerable Upananda, the Sakyan, sent fresh food to the Sangha, saying, after showing it to Venerable Upananda, it's to be given to the Sangha. Just then, Upananda had gone to the village for alms. When those people arrived at the monastery, they asked for Upananda and were told where he was. They said, Venerables, after showing it to Venerable Upananda, this fresh food is to be given to the Sangha. The monks told the Buddha. He said, well then, receive it and put it aside until Upananda returns. But because Upananda visited families before eating, he returned late to the monastery. At this time, food was scarce, and the monks refused an invitation to eat more, even after taking just a little. After reflection, they even declined altogether. Yet now the whole Sangha was being invited, and so, being afraid of wrongdoing, they did not accept. Accept, monks, and eat. I allow one who has finished his meal and refused an invitation to eat more, to eat non-leftovers that were received before the meal. When the Buddha had stayed at Rajagaya for as long as he liked, he set out wandering towards Savatthi. When he eventually arrived, he stayed in the Jeta Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. At that time, Venerable Sariputta had a fever. Venerable Mahamoggallana went to him and asked, When you previously had a fever, Sariputta, how did you get better? I had lotus roots and tubers. Then, just as a strong man might bend or stretch his arm, Mahamoggallana disappeared from the Jeta Grove and reappeared on the banks of the Mandakini lotus pond. An elephant saw Mahamoggallana coming and said to him, Welcome, Venerable Mahamoggallana. Please come. What do you need, Venerable? What may I give? I need lotus roots and tubers. The elephant told another elephant, Listen, give as many roots and tubers as the Venerable needs. It plunged into the Mandakini lotus pond and pulled up lotus roots and tubers with his trunk. It gave them a good rinse, bound them in a bundle, and went up to Mahamoggallana. Then, just as a strong man might bend or stretch his arm, Mahamoggallana disappeared from the banks of the Mandakini lotus pond and reappeared in the Jeta Grove. And that elephant did the same. It had the roots and tubers offered to Mahamoggallana before returning to the Mandakini lotus pond in the same manner. Mahamoggallana then brought those lotus roots and tubers to Sariputta. When he had eaten them, his fever subsided, but there was much left over. At this time food was scarce, and the monks refused an invitation to eat more, even after taking just a little. After reflection, they even declined altogether. Yet now the whole Sangha was being invited, and so, being afraid of wrongdoing, they did not accept. Accept, monks, and eat. I allow one who has finished his meal and refused an invitation to eat more, to eat non-leftovers coming from the forest or a lotus pond. On one occasion in Savatthi, much fruit had been given, but there was no attendant. Being afraid of wrongdoing, the monks did not eat it. I allow you to eat fruit that hasn't been made allowable if it's seedless or the seeds have been removed. 8. Discussion of the prohibition against surgery. When the Buddha had stayed at Savatthi for as long as he liked, he set out wandering towards Rajagaya. When he eventually arrived, he stayed in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. At that time, the doctor Akasagota performed surgery on a certain monk who had hemorrhoids. Just then, while walking about the dwellings, the Buddha came to this monk's dwelling. Akasagota saw the Buddha coming and said to him, "Good Gautama, please come and see this monk's anus. It's just like the mouth of a lizard." The Buddha thought, "This foolish man is mocking me," and he turned around right there. Soon afterwards he had the Sangha gathered and questioned the monks. "Is there a sick monk in such and such a dwelling?" "There is, sir." "What's his illness?" "He has hemorrhoids, and the doctor Akasagota is performing surgery." The Buddha rebuked him. "It's not suitable, monks, for that foolish man. It's not proper, it's not worthy of a monastic, it's not allowable, it's not to be done. How can he have surgery on the private parts? The skin is delicate in that area. Sores heal with difficulty, and a scalpel is hard to wield there. This will affect people's confidence." After rebuking him, he gave a teaching and addressed the monks. "You shouldn't have surgery on the private parts. If you do, you commit a serious offense." When they heard that the Buddha had prohibited surgery, the monks from the group of 6 had enemas. The monks of few desires complained and criticized them. How can the monks from the group of 6 have enemas? They told the Buddha what had happened. "Is it true, monks, that the monks from the group of 6 are having enemas?" "It's true, sir." After rebuking them, the Buddha gave a teaching and addressed the monks. "You shouldn't get surgery within 3.5 centimeters of the private parts or have enemas. If you do, you commit a serious offense." 9. Discussion of the prohibition against human flesh. When the Buddha had stayed at Rajagaya for as long as he liked, he set out wandering towards Benares. When he eventually arrived, he stayed in the deer park at Isipatana. At that time in Benares there were 2 lay followers, Supiya and Supiya, husband and wife, both with confidence in Buddhism. They were donors and benefactors, and they attended on the Sangha. On one occasion, Supiya went to the monastery. She walked from one dwelling to dwelling, from yard to yard, asking the monks, "Is anyone sick? What may I bring?" Just then a certain monk had drunk a purgative. He told Supiya about this, adding, "I need meat broth." "No problem, I'll organize it." She then returned to her house and told a servant, "Go and get some meat." Saying, "Yes, madam," he walked around the whole of Benares, but could not find any. So he returned to Supiya and said, "There's no meat, madam. There's no slaughter today." Supiya thought, "If that monk doesn't get meat broth, his illness will get worse or he'll die. Because I've already agreed to provide it, it would not be right if I didn't." She then took a knife, cut flesh from her own thigh, and gave it to a slave, saying, "Prepare this meat and give it to the sick monk in such and such a dwelling. If anyone asks for me, tell them I'm sick." She then wrapped her thigh in her upper robe, entered her bedroom, and lay down on the bed. When Supiya returned home, he asked the slave where his wife was. The slave told him. He then went to see her, and she told him what had happened. He thought, "It's astonishing and amazing how much faith and confidence Supiya has, in that she gives up even her own flesh. Is there anything she would not give?" Delighted and joyful, he went to the Buddha. He bowed, sat down, and said, "Sir, please accept tomorrow's meal from me, together with the Sangha of monks." The Buddha consented by remaining silent. Knowing that the Buddha had consented, Supiya got up from his seat, bowed down, circumambulated the Buddha with his right side toward him, and left. The following morning, Suppiya had various kinds of fine foods prepared. He then had the Buddha informed that the meal was ready. The Buddha robed up, took his bowl and robe, and went to Suppiya's house, where he sat down on the prepared seat, together with the Sangha of monks. Suppiya approached the Buddha and bowed down to him. When the Buddha asked him where Suppiya was, he replied that she was sick. "Well then, please tell her to come." "She's not able, sir." "Well then, carry her in here." And they did. The moment Suppiya saw the Buddha, that great wound healed, and was perfectly covered with skin and hairs. Suppiya and Suppiya exclaimed, "The great power and might of the Buddha is truly astonishing and amazing." Delighted and joyful, they personally served various kinds of fine foods to the Sangha of monks headed by the Buddha. When the Buddha had finished his meal, they sat down to one side. The Buddha instructed, inspired, and gladdened them with a teaching, after which he got up from his seat and left. Soon afterwards, the Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned the monks. "Who asked Suppiya for meat?" The responsible monk told the Buddha, "Did you get the meat?" "I did, sir." "Did you eat it?" "Yes." "Were you circumspect about it?" "No, sir." The Buddha rebuked him. "Foolish man, how can you eat meat without circumspection? You have eaten human flesh. This will affect people's confidence." After rebuking him, he gave a teaching and addressed the monks. There are people who have faith and confidence, even to the point of giving up their own flesh. You shouldn't eat human flesh. If you do, you commit a serious offense. You shouldn't eat flesh without being circumspect. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct. Discussion of the prohibition against elephant meat, etc. At one time, the king's elephants had died. Because there was a shortage of food, people ate the elephant meat. They also gave elephant meat to monks who were walking for alms. When the monks ate it, people complained and criticized them. How can the Sakya monastics eat elephant meat? Elephants are an attribute of kingship. If the king knew, he would not be pleased with those monks. They told the Buddha, "You shouldn't eat elephant meat. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct." At one time, the king's horses had died. Because there was a shortage of food, people ate the horse meat. They also gave horse meat to monks who were walking for alms. When the monks ate it, people complained and criticized them. How can the Sakyan monastics eat horse meat? Horses are an attribute of kingship. If the king knew, he would not be pleased with those monks. They told the Buddha, "You shouldn't eat horse meat. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct." At one time, when there was a shortage of food, people ate dog meat. They also gave dog meat to monks who were walking for alms. When the monks ate it, people complained and criticized them. How can the Sakyan monastics eat dog meat? Dogs are disgusting and repulsive. They told the Buddha, "You shouldn't eat dog meat. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct." At one time, when there was a shortage of food, people ate snake meat. They also gave snake meat to monks who were walking for alms. When the monks ate it, people complained and criticized them. How can the Sakyan monastics eat snake meat? Snakes are disgusting and repulsive. Even Supasa, the king of dragons, went to see the Buddha. He bowed down to the Buddha and said, "Sir, there are dragons without faith and confidence. They might harm the monks, even over small matters. Please ask the venerables not to eat snake meat." The Buddha instructed, inspired, and gladdened him with a teaching, after which Supasa bowed down, circumambulated the Buddha with his right side toward him, and left. Soon afterwards, the Buddha gave a teaching and addressed the monks. You shouldn't eat snake meat. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct. On one occasion, hunters killed a lion and ate the lion meat. They also gave lion meat to monks who were walking for alms. After eating it, those monks returned to the wilderness, and because of the smell of lion meat, lions attacked them. You shouldn't eat lion meat. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct. On one occasion, hunters killed a tiger, a leopard, a bear, a hyena, and ate the hyena meat. They also gave hyena meat to monks who were walking for alms. After eating it, those monks returned to the wilderness, and because of the smell of hyena meat, hyenas attacked them. You shouldn't eat tiger meat, leopard meat, bear meat, or hyena meat. If you do, you commit an offense of wrong conduct. The second section for recitation on Suppiya is finished. 11. The allowance for congee and honey balls. When the Buddha had stayed at Benares for as long as he liked, he set out wandering towards Andakavinda, together with a large sangha of 1,250 monks. On this occasion, the country people had loaded large quantities of salt, oil, rice, and fresh food onto carts, and were following behind the sangha of monks headed by the Buddha, thinking, when our turn comes, we'll prepare a meal. 500 people living on leftovers were also following along. Eventually, the Buddha arrived at Andakavinda and stayed there. Soon afterwards, a certain Brahmin, whose turn to offer a meal had not yet come, thought, I've been following the sangha of monks headed by the Buddha for 2 months, waiting to offer them a meal, and I'm still waiting. Moreover, I am all alone, and all my household business is being neglected. Why don't I inspect the dining hall and prepare whatever is lacking? When he did, he saw that 2 things were missing, congee and honey balls. He then went to Venerable Ananda and told what he had been thinking, adding, Good Ananda, if I were to prepare congee and honey balls, would good Gautama accept it? Well, Brahmin, let me ask the Buddha. Venerable Ananda told the Buddha, who said, Allow it to be prepared, Ananda. Ananda passed the message on to the Brahmin. The following morning, that Brahmin prepared much congee and many honey balls, and brought it to the Buddha, saying, Good Gautama, please accept the congee and the honey balls. Well then, Brahmin, give it to the monks. But being afraid of wrongdoing, the monks did not accept. The Buddha said, Accept, monks, and eat. That Brahmin then personally served much congee and many honey balls to the sangha of monks headed by the Buddha. When the Buddha had finished his meal, the Brahmin sat down to one side, and the Buddha said this to him, Brahmin, there are these 10 benefits of congee. One who gives congee gives life, beauty, happiness, strength, and eloquence. Drinking congee stills hunger, allays thirst, gets rid of wind, cleans out the bladder, and helps the digestion of food remnants. One who gives congee respectfully at the right time to the restrained ones who live on the gifts of others, such a one supplies them with 10 things. Long life, beauty, happiness, and strength. And eloquence, too, one gets from that. Hunger, thirst, and wind are removed. The bladder is cleaned, and the food digested. This tonic is praised by the accomplished one. Therefore, for a person looking for happiness, one wishing for heavenly bliss or desiring human prosperity, it's appropriate to give congee regularly. The Buddha then got up from his seat and left. Soon afterwards he gave a teaching and addressed the monks. I allow congee and honey balls. 12. The government official with recently acquired faith. When people heard that the Buddha had allowed congee and honey balls, they prepared rice porridge and honey balls early in the morning. After eating rice porridge and honey balls to their satisfaction in the morning, the monks did not eat as much as they had intended in the dining hall. At this time, a certain government official who had recently acquired faith in Buddhism had invited the Sangha of monks headed by the Buddha for the meal on the following day. He thought, why don't I prepare 1,250 bowls of meat for the 1,250 monks? I can then give one bowl to each and every monk. The following morning, that official had various kinds of fine foods prepared, as well as 1,250 bowls of meat. He then had the Buddha informed that the meal was ready. The Buddha robed up, took his bowl and robe, and went to that Brahmin's house, where he sat down on the prepared seat, together with the Sangha of monks. That official then served the monks in the dining hall. As he did so, the monks said, "Only a little, thanks." Please don't say that, because I've only recently acquired faith in Buddhism. I've prepared much food of various kinds, as well as 1,250 bowls of meat. I'll bring one bowl of meat to each and every one of you. Venerables, please accept as much as you like. We're not taking so little because of that, but because we ate rice porridge and honey balls to our satisfaction early in the morning. The official complained and criticized them. When the venerables have been invited by me, how can they eat someone else's rice porridge? Am I incapable of giving them as much as they like? Angry and aiming to criticize, he walked around filling the monks' alms bowls, saying, "Eat it or take it away." When he had personally served the various kinds of fine foods to the Sangha of monks headed by the Buddha, and the Buddha had finished his meal, the official sat down to one side. The Buddha instructed, inspired, and gladdened him with a teaching, after which he got up from his seat and left. Soon after the Buddha had left, that official felt anxiety and remorse, thinking, "It's bad for me, truly bad, that I acted like this. I wonder, did I make much merit or demerit?" He then went to the Buddha, bowed, sat down, and told him what he had been thinking, adding, "How is it, sir? Did I make much merit or demerit?" When you invited the Sangha of monks headed by the Buddha for a meal on the following day, you made much merit. When each and every monk received rice from you, you made much merit. You are heading for heaven. When the official heard this, he was joyful and elated. He got up from his seat, bowed down, circumambulated the Buddha with his right side toward him, and left. Soon afterwards, the Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned the monks. "Is it true, monks, that monks who had been invited for a meal ate someone else's rice porridge beforehand?" "It's true, sir." The Buddha rebuked them. "How can those foolish men eat someone else's congee beforehand when they have been invited for a meal? This will affect people's confidence." After rebuking them, he gave a teaching and addressed the monks. "When you have been invited to a meal, you shouldn't eat someone else's rice porridge beforehand. If you do, you should be dealt with according to the rule. 13. The account of Belata Kachana. When the Buddha had stayed at Andakavinda for as long as he liked, he set out wandering towards Rajgaya, together with a large Sangha of 1,250 monks. Just then Belata Kachana was travelling from Rajgaya to Andakavinda with 500 carts, all of them filled with jars of sugar. When the Buddha saw Belata Kaccana coming, he stepped off the road and sat down at the foot of a tree. Belata Kaccana went up to the Buddha, bowed, and said, "Sir, I would like to give 1 jar of sugar to each and every monk." "Well then, Kaccana, just bring 1 jar of sugar." Saying, "Yes, sir," he got a jar of sugar, returned to the Buddha, and said, "Here is the jar. What should I do next?" "Now give sugar to the monks." Saying, "Yes, sir," he did just that. He then said to the Buddha, "I've given sugar to the monks, but there's much left over. What should I do with that?" "Give the monks as much sugar as they need." Saying, "Yes, sir," he did as requested. He then said to the Buddha, "I've given the monks as much sugar as they need, but there's much left over. What should I do with that?" "Give the monks as much sugar as they want." Saying, "Yes, sir," he again did as requested. Some monks filled their alms bowls and even their water filters and bags. When he was finished, he said to the Buddha, "I've given the monks as much sugar as they want, but there's much left over. What should I do with that?" "Give to those who live on scraps." Saying, "Yes, sir," he again did as requested. He then said to the Buddha, "I've given them sugar, but there's much left over. What should I do with that?" "Give them as much sugar as they need." Saying, "Yes, sir," he again did as requested. He then said to the Buddha, "I've given them as much sugar as they need, but there's much left over. What should I do with that?" "Give them as much sugar as they want." Saying, "Yes, sir," he once again did as requested. Some of those who lived on scraps filled basins, water pots, and baskets, and some even their laps. When he was finished, he said to the Buddha, "I've given them as much sugar as they want, but there's much left over. What should I do with that?" "Kaccana, I don't see anyone in this world, with its gods, lords of death, and supreme beings, in this society with its monastics and Brahmins, its gods and humans, who would be able to properly digest that sugar, except a Buddha or his disciple. So discard that sugar where there are no cultivated plants, or in water without life." Saying, "Yes, sir," he dumped that sugar in water without life. As he did so, that sugar hissed, sputtered, fumed, and smoked, just like a ploughshare heated the whole day, hisses, sputters, fumes, and smokes when dropped in water. Belata Kaccana was awestruck, with goose-bumps all over. He approached the Buddha, bowed, and sat down. The Buddha then gave him a progressive talk on generosity, morality, and heaven, on the downside, degradation, and defilement of worldly pleasures, and he revealed the benefits of renunciation. When the Buddha knew that his mind was ready, supple, without hindrances, joyful and confident, he revealed the teaching unique to the Buddhas: suffering, its origin, its end, and the path. And just as a clean and stainless cloth absorbs dye properly, so too, while he was sitting right there, Belata Kaccana experienced the stainless vision of the truth. Anything that has a beginning has an end. He had seen the truth, had reached, understood, and penetrated it. He had gone beyond doubt and uncertainty, had attained to confidence, and had become independent of others in the teacher's instruction. He then said to the Buddha, "Wonderful, sir, wonderful. Just as one might set upright what's overturned, or reveal what's hidden, or show the way to one who's lost, or bring a lamp into the darkness so that one with eyes might see what's there, just so has the Buddha made the teaching clear in many ways. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha of monks. Please accept me as a lay follower who's gone for refuge for life." The Buddha then continued wandering towards Rajagaya. When he eventually arrived, he stayed in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. At that time, there was an abundance of sugar in Rajagaya. The monks thought, the Buddha has only allowed sugar for the sick, and being afraid of wrongdoing, they did not eat it. I allow you to take sugar when you're sick, and sugar mixed in water when you're not.